that specific work. But for right now, we're going to worry about t-shirts. And t-shirts, you got to push a lot of ink through. So you're going to ask for a sort of a rough screen, which is a 10XX screen silk. Now originally the silk was made from the silkworms in Japan, and the Japanese started the silk screening. The way they would do it, they'd take the little silk screen things, the little silk eggs that the bugs laid in the trees to have to wrap their cocoon in, and they put those in the oven, kill the little worm inside, and then unwrap those things, and then they would have the silk thread all the way through. If they let the worm eat through it, their silk was ruined. So this is this 10XX is the silk that you're going to be looking for. We'll come up to the face. The sizing that's in these silk rolls is made out of like starch and other things that keep it pretty flexible while it's on the roll. Because if it didn't have any sizing in it, this silk would just sort of flop around and not be controlled too easily. And that's the part that we're going to have to wash out before we put the emulsion on it. I just want you to know that each of these silks does have this sizing in it, and you got to be careful not to put any emulsion over it. This silk is a real fine silk, which has I believe a metric number. It's a 220. I have no idea what that means. It's probably the number of strands per inch or something, because it's a real fine silk. And this is the one that they use for detail stuff like the watch faces and small directions on boxes or that kind of stuff. And has to be really handled with care, because it's hard to stretch on the frame, and it's hard to get the detail in when you burn it in with the sun. So when you get to the metric numbers, like the 210s, 220s, be careful, because they're hard to use. You're still looking for a 10XX. And a lot of houses won't handle this fine as silk. But in case you run across it, this stuff runs about $12 a yard, 42 inches wide. See that, gang? That's the ink that Big Daddy uses, called plastisol. And that's not what you would think ink would be like, do you? That's why before you figure out what kind of silk size you're going to use, you got to get the ink that you're going to use. Seems like a big vicious circle, but if you're going to use a real thin ink, you can't use a real coarse screen. You got to use a real thin, fine screen. So with the 10XX, this plastisol is just right. I mean, this is just like worse than mud. The reason I use this ink is because it never dries unless you put a certain light on it, which I'm going to tell you about later. So I can have this ink laying around 10 years and get no skin on it. Always ready to use. Never have to worry about getting any goodies in the silk and the screen to clean out. So I don't have to clean my screens out. And the guys that run these big silk screen machines, they do the same thing. They just leave the ink right in their frames. See that right there? Remember that name, plastisol. Now you're going to go down to your local silk screen paint guy, and he's going to say, well, we got some of this Sherwin-Williams enamel ink, it'll air dry and all that stuff. And sure, if you don't have heater or the light that I'm going to show you, the light costs about $100. If you don't have one of those and you want to hang them on a rack on the outside and let the sun dry them, you're going to have to get something that's a little thinner. If you can't get anything thinner and silk screen wise, you might try in a bigger city in a silk screen warehouse. You call them art supplies or engineering supplies. And you get all kinds of silk screen paints there. But try and get used to using plastisol or ink that has to be dried with ultraviolet ray, which is what I'm going to show you later. But this is what Big Daddy Roth use right here. That's a hot setup right here. Can you see that over there?
Oh yeah.
Okay, gang, now you can see why I made the frames to be 21 inches wide. I can get this 42-inch silk on there. I won't be wasting any of the silk. I can either put 2 on there, or I can make up 10 frames ahead of time, put them, just roll them on there, and just staple them on there roughly. If you don't have a sharp knife, don't try it, because sometimes you leave strands hanging off of this thing here, and it'll get back into your frame, and you don't want, you want to keep all the strands that you can out of there. A good silkscreen framer, he'll always have a sharp knife on him. If you don't have one, what you do when Christmas time comes around, they have these Santa Clauses at these department stores. You just go up and you tell this guy, you know, hey, I want a knife, sharp knife for Christmas. And, you know, I mean, what girlfriend or wife ain't gonna get you a good knife for a couple of bucks? There it is. Keep it sharp. It's a stone that you can get out of the yard or something. Just oil it and keep it sharp all the time. Okay, gang, now that you haven't done any stretching yet at all here, because we've just given each frame a piece of silk, which is what we're interested in. And the first 2 corners that we do here, we're not going to worry about stretching this silk, because the stretch comes in the last 2 corners. But we are going to staple this along here. I want you to notice that I'm stapling close to where the silk joins the wood. That keeps the ink from crawling underneath there. If I staple it out here and pressed on it, that ink would all creep out here. So I'm going to keep that ink inside the frame by putting those staples as close as I can to that edge. Now with these 2 edges stapled, I'm going to have to tighten this up here. And a lot of these companies, they got the big silkscreen stretchers and all that. All you got to do is grab hold of it with your thumb and take the staple gun and use that as part of the stretching process. Because you stretch it as tight as you can with your thumb, then you take the staple gun and push it too. Because we're going to put some paper tape on her later, I'm going to cut these extra edges off of here